Whether you're home or away, stay connected to your team with T-Mobile, the network that covers 99% of people in America. They've been investing billions to light up their best network ever. From your backyard to a sold-out stadium, get T-Mobile's best coverage yet. Plus, with T-Mobile, you get a price lock guarantee, so they won't raise the rate of your talk, text, and data, ever. There's never been a better time to switch. Visit your local T-Mobile store today. Coverage not available in some areas. Price lock exclusions like taxes, fees, select promos, and third-party services apply. See T-Mobile.com.
Hail cheaters! Welcome from the green zone, Brandon. We're recording from the war zone that is Gameweek 25. This is a dispatch. We're 5/6 of the way through. We still have 2 matches left to go in this wild game week. First of all, my name is Josh. I'm here with Brandon. Brandon, how are you?
I'm good. I'm here with my khaki vest with lots of pockets. I'm trying to think of what other things, foreign war correspondence. Where the FPL points are whizzing by our heads as we talk. It's very chaotic.
Yeah, we're not catching any of those points. Those are other. I don't know who it is. Yeah,
it's the one war zone where I'd love to get hit once in a while.
When Junior Firpo is the leading player for an FPL game week, it's been a little chaotic so far, Brandon.
Oh, for sure. And we were kind of looking at the results from this weekend, through our memories and thinking, were there good matches? I mean, there were some interesting results, but it was not a weekend of standout moments necessarily. I thought
it's kind of unlike last weekend, right? Because last weekend we had it was another not bad. We're kind of in 3 weeks in a row of FPL game weeks. It's sort of okay, all right.
Arsenal caught a case of trying to walk it into the goal during the first half of that Leicester match, and it was kind of fun to see. It was very retro Arsenal, that was Wenger constantly trying to get his ladder teams just to walk it in. Man City back to their sort of old ways of just steamrolling opponents. I think Bournemouth has made its case for they have to be the greatest whipping boys in the Premier League. I think this has not been a banner season for whipping boy teams.
Well, the thing is, they're not even bottom of the table, right? Southampton are bottom of the table. Bournemouth are tied with Everton and only 1 back of lead, so it's kind of weird. Southampton is the only team I feel quite confident is going to go down. But even then, let's see what happens. I think it's at the very least, I think every year you kind of hope you're going to get the bottom of the table clash and the top of the table clash to end the season. It's a very rare thing. I think the first year I really was kind of all in, back in the 2010-11 season. That was maybe the last time you had it. That was when Arsenal, that was the Man City season, right? Where they won their. Actually, no, it was actually the next year. It was 11-12 when Man City won. And then the year before that, 10-11, is when you had the crazy bottom of the table. It was 5 clubs, Birmingham City. But the stakes really are so high because Birmingham City went down that year, have still not been back up. And I think maybe Bolton went down that year as well. And they haven't been back up since either. So I want a little bottom of the table drama. This has nothing to do with FPL, though. Let's go back. Let's get back to it because I wanted to ask you something, Brandon.
Sure.
During that Arsenal-Leicester match, you and I both stuck to our guns, Captain Saka. We're confident. We felt I think especially because you and I felt like we both kind of chickened out after we said we kept it Rashford the week before.
Yeah, but Holland instead for his blank.
Yeah, exactly. So we stuck to our guns with Saka. Saka had a fair amount of the ball, scored an offside goal. It certainly could have gotten something out of that match. Arsenal were certainly very dominant in the match. But he blanks and Martinelli, who I sold for a hit to bring in Saka, scores. So I'm just steam coming out of my ears. I mean, there was always a possibility of it, but but I really wanted to have Saka, and I really wanted to have him for 26 as well. And so I felt like this was the right time to do it. And there was a opportunity where I maybe could have had 3 Arsenal midfielders and dropped White. But White got 7, so I mean, in the end, 7 for White, 10 for Martinelli. It's there was kind of no way around it unless I dropped Odegaard, which I just didn't feel great about doing. I mean, that guy's going to start almost every week I mean, literally every week. I would say in any key match when he's healthy. So anyway, Saka blanks, and then in my head, I have already given Mo Salah, the other popular captain, I've given him about 16 points. I'm assuming 16 is low end of what he's getting in that match at Palace later the day. Where were you at after the Arsenal game?
Yeah, it did feel like it was going to turn against us when Saka did blank, and I spent my two free transfers, one on Tarkowski and one on Salah. Salah was my only Liverpool player going into that Crystal Palace match. So I thought it was actually going to be a rank slaughter for me. Even if Salah came through with points, I didn't have Salah captained, and there were going to be a lot of highly owned players around Salah, whether it was Trent or Gakpo. I thought Gakpo looked like Liverpool's best attacker by some stretch to me, in my opinion. It was kind of unfortunate that he didn't get any returns. I was quite nervous, and I think in our the main league that I track, even though I had Salah, his impact on my team was -5%. So even owning Salah, I under-owned him in my main competitive league. So I was kind of fearful of any returns. Now that said, I still think if you haven't captained Salah, I still really want him to return in midweek. I think those points. It seemed like a weird week where it felt like everyone was doing something slightly different within the FPL community. So even if it feels like you under-own a player like Salah because you haven't captained him, there are still a handful of managers around you in rank who don't have him. So it's sort of like, I feel like if I get Salah returns, it might be like one step forward, two steps back or something like that. But there will still be some form of forward progress. And that is kind of what is, I think, doing everyone's nut in Gameweek 25 is kind of like, wait, what am I kind of rooting for here? There's lots of weird doubles. I spent a lot of transfer hits. I'm not, and I'm not getting much in return. So you did a -8 where I just played conservatively and didn't take hits. And we're kind of neck and neck. And now you have more players going into the midweek fixtures than I do. So how are you? How does that leave you emotionally?
Well, yeah, I mean, I went without Salah ultimately. Yes, I'm on 37 points. I'm actually on 45 points, but with the -8 brings me down to 37 points, and you're on 39 just straight up. So we're 2 points separated, but I do have 2 more players than you, assuming Darwin plays. Although even if Darwin doesn't play, I'll get 3 from Bailey off the bench, so it's not a total loss there. So I guess I'm feeling okay in the end, just because Kane scored today, and the other move I was considering was dropping Kane, and I ultimately went with the slightly riskier move where I ended up dropping Trippier because it was the way that I could get Trent without dropping Kane. And so I felt slightly validated, or I don't know if validated is quite the right word, but you know what I mean? I felt like maybe I dodged a little bit of a bullet there, holding on to him, and you know, we'll see how much not having Trippier hurts me moving forward. But I don't have Salah right now either, and I've survived that for one match of the game week. And so yeah, we'll see what I mean. I didn't think he would played that well. I mean, this is sort of the story of Salah all season, right? I mean, you and I said this going to the pot. If it wasn't a double game week, we wouldn't consider buying him. That wouldn't have been anything anyone would have considered otherwise.
Yeah. He's just really struggling with one-on-ones. He cannot beat a single defender on the dribble. And because the midfield is not really synced up for Liverpool, they're finding it really hard to get Mo behind the defense and to deliver those balls that he's used to getting that he can just sort of like bend around to the far post after beating the entire back line. So, I think Gakpo was the one who was finding the most space and was the most interesting. So very curious to see what that lineup looks like. I mean, I really needed this week because I decided to swerve Liverpool apart from Salah's. I really needed some random marginal guys on my team to come through. Andreas Pereira, my 4th mid, got a 1-pointer, just like not a vintage performance from him on Friday night against Wolves. Sam Greenwood. You know, I was just banking on a 1-pointer from Sam, which he could not deliver. So I'm effectively with 10 players, right. and that stings. And Saliba, I cannot talk about Saliba on this podcast anymore. So I don't know. I was kind of like my game week hinged on Greenwood and Andreas Pereira. So I put myself in a tough position, and I've only dropped like 8,000. And let's see. Actually, no. I've dropped roughly 3,000 in an OR from 42K to 45K. So it really is nothing. So it's like another week of I'm just kind of out here trying to dodge bullets until there is that moment where I get to strike. When is the game week going to come along that I can strike?
You know what? It could still be that moment. I mean, what you need is for Saka to have a big match.
That's right.
On Wednesday, right?
That's right.
If Salah gets 6 points, you know, we'll give him an assist or whatever, right? Yeah. Salah gets 6 points and Saka gets a goal and assist and 3 bonus or whatever. I'm just like, these are reasonable, maybe not likely, but reasonable outcomes that could happen,
it's not
right?
Too much to ask, Josh.
But even if our captain outscores Salah by 8 points, that's going to be enough for you to probably end up on a green arrow for the game week in the end. So yeah, I think the Leicester match was the one where you're hoping for a little bit more from Saka. I was hoping that my feeling about him was just that he had the highest floor of any of the you know, I guess it was maybe him. You know, I was considering sort of 3 captains. Saka, I was always going to bring in Saka this game week, and Saka, Trent, and Salah, and I still feel like, in my opinion, that Trent was the better vice captain over Salah. But you know, I think. And so, yeah, I mean, so Trent did work out. I mean, I've taken this -8. Trent has worked out okay. And I'm feeling okay with him going forward because the defender options are just not solid kind of across the board right now. And so I may end up just riding with him for like the rest of the season now that I've got him, you know, back in there. And this team has low-key kept 3 consecutive clean sheets. They never look good doing it, but they have
there were some
done it.
Incredible moments from Trent against Palace where he basically just gave the ball to Mateta at one point, and he scooped it over.
Yeah. Didn't he only play like 71 minutes or something like that? And then, you know, Gakpo, let's see what he does. He might be out as soon as this week. So, you know, I mean, the big one though, this one hit me and a lot of other managers out there. You know, mine was a little, I felt a little, I don't know, I didn't feel good about it. Nobody felt good about it. We all woke up on Saturday morning to the news that Darwin was like almost assuredly not going to play. There's also a lot of news that Nketiah wasn't going to start. So I had a more chaotic version of my team that was a -12 where I was going to bring in Darwin and Nketiah for Kane. And we might not have recorded this podcast tonight if I had, you know, done that.
I do. Take yourself back to when that news was sort of circulating that Darwin was going to miss the game, and the in the know accounts were saying, well, he did not travel with Liverpool. Darwin didn't. And I just want to, it's not the best joke that you'll ever hear, but I thought it was the perfect joke. FPL Finding Glory on Twitter says, sounds like Darwin just missed the bus, but had an XG of 2, so was very unlucky not to get on it. And I thought that was a very wonderful articulation of how Darwin's season is going. Anyway, you get the joke. You don't need me to explain it to you. So shout out to Finding Glory. Excellent Twitter work there.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, I'm still in too much pain, Brandon, to process Darwin jokes right now.
Okay.
But it's all fine. I mean, it was just annoying. I mean, we've all been anyone who's played FPL. This is par for the course. You know, you wake up and there's the injured player. I wish there were actual reliable in the knows. That's what I want more of. But or that they would just. I mean, this is just rehashing like so I complained about a zillion times. But you know, in the NFL, you actually have to release injury information. This is the, you know, the NBA does this too. You know, it's like so and so is questionable, doubtful, out, and these are all things that gamblers and fantasy people can use to make decisions.
In your experience playing NFL fantasy, do you find how honest are those reports from NFL teams?
Well, it's always one level So basically, like, if a player is doubtful, like they're like they've died, like they're if they're it's never quite, if a player is like questionable, he's probably playing, it's always like one run.
You can interpret it's like going to Pitchfork and reading a music review, and they're like, okay, they gave this album an 8.5, I'm probably not going to like it, but they gave this other album a 6.2, I'm going to love it. You got to know how to read these things.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but if he had been listed as questionable or doubtful, I probably wouldn't have brought him in, right? Like, because it just wouldn't have been worth it on another -4. But so we'll see. He might play on Wednesday. He might not. I really don't know. But I was replacing Mitra, who wasn't going to play at all, and there really weren't any forward options out there for Darwin. So I may have done it anyway, even if he's only going to play 1 week.
Yeah,
it may still have been, or one match.
He's going to become Ivan Toney pretty quickly here anyway. So,
I think that's right.
Yeah, because we're going to be talking a lot about Brentford in the moment. The theme you've put together here for us, Josh, is the double game week chaos, which is funny to me in a way because we're in the midst of game week 25 double chaos. But that's not even half the story. We've got doubles in 27, doubles in 29. There's just a lot that I think that what we'll suggest to the listeners, Josh, is that we aren't necessarily going to flat out plan for game week 29 at this point. But this is just information that FPL managers should have in the back of their mind. I think our most immediate strategy would be 26, obviously, and then the doubles in 27.
Yeah, and the doubles are really they're not great doubles, right? Brentford, Brighton, Palace, Southampton are doubles. Those are the kind of Brighton. Okay, sure, I can find 2, maybe 3 players I want on Brighton, right? I mean, Mitoma, March, Estepani, and all sort of stand out. Maybe Sanchez if you need to replace a keeper. Brentford, you've got Toney, maybe a defender. Those are the 2 that you consider. Palace and Southampton might just be full on passes for me. James Ward-Prowse is the only one I would maybe consider. But I think you're right to bring up 26 though as well, because what's appealing, especially about Brighton and Brentford, and I suppose even Southampton, to be quite honest, if you were going to consider Prowse, is they'll have good fixtures in 26 as well. So if you wanted to move on Ivan Toney, you could make that move for game week 26, and they play Fulham at home. Fulham haven't been quite at their best of late, and that's a Monday match. So it's always fun to have a player on a Monday match, Brandon. It's nothing like ending the first day of your work week.
You gotta have a little extra gas in the FPL tank, and it's just like one last hit before the game week wraps. It feels good.
Yeah, and Brighton play West Ham at home in 26. Suddenly, West Ham maybe don't seem like quite the pushover match that may have been, and I don't know how much of it is the non-sacking of David Moyes. I don't know where people got the idea, Brandon, that Moyes had been sacked. Certainly wasn't from this podcast.
Who would spread such information?
Yeah.
it does feel like everyone's kind of coming back to fitness at West Ham. Jared Bowen is he had a shot off the post this weekend, and he's been returning pretty well. He is still like the form attacker carrying over from last season for West Ham, and I feel like Ben Rama and Paqueta and Rice, like everyone's sort of like clicking back into gear. So I feel like they're going to escape this relegation conversation pretty soon. It's still a little challenging to convince me to invest in West Ham. I think that's.
I'm not saying invest. I just mean that Brighton playing West Ham at home is not. Gotcha. Like I was saying that, for 27, it's like, I do want a couple Brighton players, but West Ham at home suddenly doesn't seem like the kind of rock solid, just, like they're going to run them over the way it maybe would have felt maybe 10 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Yeah. So those are those are the teams that double in 27. We're actually going to talk about them a little more after the break. But I also wanted to note that the round of 16 FA Cup matches are on Tuesday and Wednesday. And depending on what happens there, some of those teams will not play in game week 28. So got another blank coming up, Brandon, and it also comes right before 12 teams play twice in 29. So it is again. This is your medical, like, this is your taking the GRE, taking your LSATs, whatever. This season is the real. It's the test for FPL managers. If you can get through this season, you have truly mastered FPL. But also a bunch of teams that have players that we all have in our fantasy teams play in these Tuesday, Wednesday matches. So this is the week of all weeks to seriously do not make an early transfer. At least wait. Do not worry about price hits. Just don't even think about it. Just wait until at least Wednesday evening to make any moves.
Yeah, if you look at Tuesday, it's Fulham Leeds are the marquee sort of Premier League FA Cup fixture. City are away. Bristol, Leicester host Blackburn. Brighton are basically every Premier League team is going to play midweek, as you just said. But I think Tuesday is the one that a lot of Liverpool asset owners are going to be watching, because you were explaining this to me earlier, Josh. If Fulham beat Leeds, then Fulham blank in game week 28, where they would play Liverpool. And suddenly we've all tripled up. A lot of managers have tripled up on Liverpool, and these players will be useless in game week 28.
Yeah, that's scary stuff. So it's going to be. So we could be in the same situation we had going into game week 25, which is like everyone's taking massive -8s to bring in play. But this time you're not even bringing in Liverpool and Arsenal players. You're bringing in Brentford and Brighton. I don't even know, like Palace. I don't think I'll be having anyone from Palace. They have to be. I actually think they might be the most unownable team in fantasy, especially with Zaha injured. Not because they're a bad team, but just because they're like it's like Man City level rotation there. It's like it's like every time someone has like a whiff of form, it's like they rest for the next 2 matches. It's like it's impossible to know who you would even have from Palace. And then Southampton, I actually think it would be kind of fun to have Ward-Prowse, Brandon. I don't know how you feel about that. It's a free kick legend, James Ward-Prowse.
I mean, yeah, he's just on fire this season. It's cognitive dissonance where he can be in such good form while Southampton are, Norwich City levels of Premier League garbage. But there you have it. Premier League and FPL do not always exist in the same universe, and that's fine.
No,
I mean, like having a dead ball specialist in fantasy is always quite enjoyable, because you then get to root for the fouls at the edge of the box, and it's just like another rooting interest that you can have.
Oh, I mean, this is why Dimitri Payet was such a beloved player. Right?
Yeah, right. Or Christian Eriksen at one point in his Spurs career.
I was thinking of Sean Maloney, by the way, who was played for Wigan. This is like going back to like the 2014-2015 season, Brad. But I remember he was like that was like the relegation season, but he was like this like fun little 4.5 million player that you could kind of consistently start just because he was he hit
recognize him.
He's 40. Oh, an incredible picture on his Wikipedia page too. I really can't recommend enough that you go Google. He looks like he's about 4'3". Highly recommend looking at this Hobbit on his. Anyway, all right, let's go. So I don't. We're not going to talk too much about chip strategy on this week's pod, or at least on this particular pod, because of this FA Cup matches. We're really going to focus on game weeks 26 and 27 on this one. But on our Patreon pod on Thursday, we will start to get into our strategy, because it's going to be very clear almost immediately what your strategy is going to be if you still have a free hit, if you still have your wild card. There's a pretty good chance I use 2 of my chips in game weeks 28 and 29. I think if you have them available, you might have to, just because. I don't know if I want to go into like 28. It's like it's one of those game weeks where I don't really want a free hit. There's not that many players I want, but if I have like literally 3 players, who could play, and I have a free hit available,
does it? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like if you can pick up 30, it's like I could do a -24, or I could just free hit and just collect my 37 points and get on with my game week. That's probably
right. And I think like that's what you'd hope for from playing any chip, whether it's a bench boost, triple cap, or whatever. You want to gain 15 to 30 points on the crowd, And only a small percentage, I would guess, like relatively speaking, would be playing a free hit in 28. So they're be pretty straightforward to get that points in. Those points be incoming.
Yeah, and then the 29 is the massive double, and so it would be kind of fun. Like I've heard some people. Of course, I just said I wasn't going to talk about chips. Now I'm starting to do it, but it would be fun in theory to. Some people were like, oh well, wild card in 27, free hit in 28, and then you could bench boost in 29 because it does seem like an appealing week to bench with all of these teams playing twice. But again, let's just see where we are after the FA Cup matches are done. So I think that's the way to. That's my strongest piece of advice is just don't even think about it until Wednesday evening. Speaking briefly of Patreon, Brandon, do you want to thank our newest Patreon supporters? We've got a handful this week.
Thank you to Nicholas Perry, Christopher Akins, Jolie J, and Richard Carl for becoming the newest Always Cheating Patreon supporters. Hey, if you like what you hear on this podcast, go to patreon.com/alwayscheating. It's a great way to say thanks to me and Josh and get more FPL content in return. We do an extra ad-free podcast every Thursday night right before the game week deadlines, typically, just for our Patreon supporters. And you get access to our Discord, where there's lively FPL and non-FPL chat happening 24/7, T-shirts at the highest level, all sorts of other fun mini leagues you can get involved in. Again, that's patreon.com/alwayscheating. Check it out.
Great. Let's take a break. We'll get back and talk about Game Week 26.
The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scorers and threes drained. I love mixing it up by betting against the spread, taking the over on Giannis's points every chance I get, and more exclusive bets like the 2x3, 2 threes scored in the first 3 minutes. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine bets like those for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/BlueWire. That's FanDuel.com/BlueWire to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. 21 plus in select states. First online real money wager only. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable free bets that expires in 14 days. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Iowa.
Hey listeners, did you hear that a Lionel Messi trading card recently sold for more than $500,000 on Golden Auctions? Golden is the leading and most trusted destination for some of the most significant pieces of sports and pop culture collectibles, and better yet, it's not just for high-ticket items. Golden's new always-on marketplace and weekly auctions start at just $5. That means collectors of all kinds can enjoy the same quality, convenience, and seamless user experience that Golden is known for. Whether you're looking to buy, sell, grade, or vault, Golden has something for everyone. Your one-stop destination for the love of collecting. Hey, let me put it to you this way. Over the last 3 recent market crashes, sports cards have held stable value. While the S&P 500 fell by an average of nearly 17% and bonds took a small hit, sports cards actually saw overall positive returns. Interested in selling your collectibles? Now is the time to do so. Golden is offering no marketplace fees for items under $10,000. List your items on Golden's marketplace now to enjoy this limited time offer. Head over to golden.co to get started. That's golden.co. GOLDIN.co.
All right, we're back. Game week 26, another old school FPL classic. Brandon, I'm looking forward to it. We got a Man City nuke. Actually, this is a great. We talked about having some kind of a mixed bag, not a ton of great matches at the weekend. I am really optimistic that we're going to see some really good ones though this weekend. We had 2 in particular stand out to me. First match on Saturday, Man City host Newcastle. And then Sunday, the final match on Sunday is Liverpool host Man United. A very interesting time, I think, time for both these clubs. Newcastle probably wishes this match was being played at a slightly different time. It feels like Newcastle are probably in their biggest kind of dip of the season right now. But Man City have been real up and down as well. So, who knows what. So
well, you remember what the result was the time they met earlier this season. It was a 3-3 thriller.
That's right.
And
yes.
I think Trippier hit a free kick, talking about dead ball danger men. And I remember benching Trippier for that match. So good for me. So, and City, even though they kind of battered Bournemouth this weekend, they're still a ways away from being trustworthy. Yeah, and I think that they and of course, I mean, classic City, just totally in control, and then just from a fantasy perspective, just another late goal conceded. Just like if you have Ederson in fantasy, your head must be like just must be popping off at the end of these matches. Like, it's just crazy, right? Like he could have had. I don't even know when the last time they kept a clean sheet was. It feels like it's been ages, but it feels like he's always on the verge of keeping one, and then they let in one goal, and he's on 99 Premier League clean sheets right now. He's one away from hitting the century mark for clean sheets, and they just can't get it done. Yeah, I started the season with Ederson, and I had to get rid of him for exactly this reason. This is happening every freaking game week. Hats off to Nathan Ake owners who he was subbed off before they lost the clean sheet. I dumped Akanji for Tarkowski, and I was having a little bit of buyer's remorse after Tark's one-pointer, and then Akanji looked like he was on for a miraculous clean sheet. Then he throws in a reducer challenge for a yellow card and clean sheet wipeout, and I did the Antonio Banderas lean back in your chair and smile satisfied. I was like, my work here is done.
Although it does remind me, speaking of tweets I saw this week, it was like, take heart, Tarkowski owners. He only got 1 point on Saturday, but he could always get less after Wednesday's match. Like, we'll see what happens there, but you'd have to imagine that he gets at least one. I'll take
a Tarkowski blank if it means Saka goes off. That's a fair exchange in my eyes.
That's true, and we'll see what happens. I don't really know about that one, just because Arsenal did. I'll talk about captains in just a second here, but Arsenal did obviously lose to Everton a couple of weeks ago, but it already feels like Arsenal kind of out of that dip. I mean, yes, 1-0 win versus Leicester, but it was a very confident, I thought, 1-0 win. They felt like they were really in control of that match the whole time. It really never felt like they were actually going to lose, even when it was 0-0 at halftime.
The comeback against Aston Villa from 2 goals down, could be a massive turning point for Arsenal's season, where they seem to have been drained of all confidence after a few run-ins with City, and then going down early against Villa. And now, I agree with you. I think they're back to their best.
Well, and then Man City dropping 2 points to Forest as well, right? That same day, which just sort of meant Arsenal were kind of back in the driver's seat for their, for their title chances. They could even lose at the Etihad, right? And still, I mean, this is assuming they win every match the rest of the season, but that also assumes that Man City will too. And why would Man City, on current form, it's hard to believe as well. And just other fun matches. We have Brighton hosting West Ham. We talked about that match a little bit earlier, but I that suddenly to me is an extremely interesting match. Could be Chelsea's last stand. I don't know. I mean, do you think that the Potter's even there this Saturday? I think it's like 50-50 as of Sunday evening, whether he's still managing that club.
It's a very tough one to call. Todd Boehly is. I don't quite understand him as in the long history of Premier League club owners. Like, what kind of personality does he have in these moments? Like, Chelsea have kind of made a habit of sacking managers when things go sour, and Boehly came in and sacked Tuchel because it was sour. So he's kind of like Boehly's fate and Potter's. Well, they're not intertwined. But I think you know what I mean. Like, I think Boehly would want to see this project kind of come to fruition. But they talked about this on Second Captains, where a lot of successful or most successful Premier League managers, you see they come in and they play a certain character, like they're acting in a way.
Yeah.
And, Klopp is sort of this like giant emotional bear, and Pep is this, very, very studious academic. And Graham Potter is not playing a role of any kind. He is a blank slate. All personality has been drained out of him. So he's not contributing anything to this club apart from, I guess I haven't looked at like the stats after this Spurs match, but coming into the Spurs match, Potter and Chelsea's stats were at least on the uptick. So whatever Potter was doing was having a slow, steady, positive effect. So if you believe in that, you would want to stick with him. But I don't think Potter has any sort of secret formula that's going to unlock all these new players that have been brought into the club. Now you're in a situation where you really do need somebody like Carlo Ancelotti who could just quickly come in and say, like, you do this, and let's go win.
Well, they still... I'm of the camp that they never should have sacked Tuchel. I mean, that that a manager should be able to have a 3-match run or whatever without getting sacked, which I guess maybe is like an argument for Potter. Although Potter, I mean, Chelsea have 3 points from their last 15, right? And lost their opening leg of their Champions League match too. Mm-hmm. Like that, so 3-15 in the Premier League. That is really terrible form. And, in Italy, when you sack your manager and they're still on contract, and then you sack the replacement, you can bring that manager back. In theory, Chelsea could still do this too. So I don't know why they don't just sack Potter and just bring Tuchel back. Like Tuchel to me is like clearly a superior manager. I mean, this is I'm like talking out of my. I'm just rambling. I'm not a Chelsea supporter, but to me, it's like it does feel like you could just bring. I mean, he did this already. He did this 2 years ago, and they won the Champions League, right? So I try to run it back. I mean, they have all these great players. All of them are signed on contracts that stretch for 3, 4, 5 decades. Like, I think it'd be fine. And let's see what Tuchel and these guys can do over the next 50 years or so. I think that's what I want to see.
Chelsea will be playing on the moon by the end of Tuchel's contract.
yeah, exactly. Like maybe Mars. Like why shoot so low, Brandon? Let's see what happens. So it's a really fun game week. Is really the point I'm driving at here. I'm really looking forward to it. And I think one thing that makes it interesting from a fantasy perspective is that the captaincy is very wide open this week. So you have Haaland, the kind of perma option, playing Newcastle at home, but Newcastle have dipped in form a little bit. I don't know how much the League Cup final today will affect them, but it's if they had won it, certainly that would have been better. I think for their confidence. And you have Man United away to Liverpool, and so Rashford has been incredible. Obviously, scored again. Bring that League Cup up again. He scored again today. Has basically been unstoppable. But certainly their way to Anfield, not an easy place to play. And his form has been exceptional at home, and just in more like quite good on the road. And so he's not an auto captain either. And then you have Saka, and Arteta has made this big show of that Saka must play every 3 days. It's very interesting the way he does this, but it's like he's trying to instill in him almost like the idea that he's the superstar. I like it. It's an interesting way to do it, but it's sort of Saka will play every 3 days. This is what he has to learn how to do. He's got to be exceptional at all times, and so we kind of know that Saka's going to play in this Bournemouth match. And to me, at the moment, my inclination is to captain Saka for Gameweek 26.
I'm with you. My bus team is set with Saka captained, and I think it's going to be another challenge of what's the vibe going into Saturday morning. And Haaland looked decent, I think, against Bournemouth. He was quite active. He was dropping a little deeper. He was finding it a little easier to get involved. And I pulled up some comparative stats for Erling. You may have heard of him. For Haaland, Saka, and Rashford. And Haaland just really stands out in an incredible way for big chances and bonus points, and I think that tends to mean he's scoring the easier goals out of these 3 guys, and when he scores, often his points come in bunches, and that obviously augurs well for accumulating bonus points game week to game week. Just looking at the last 6 game weeks, Rashford is on 7 goals, where Sorry, that's Rashford is on 7. Yeah, Haaland is on 6, and Saka is on 3. Expected goal involvement is kind of what takes Saka and Rashford both beyond Haaland. Saka having the home match against a very poor team and having decent XGI is like, okay, I'm fine. I'm fine with this. I'm fine captaining him.
Yeah, I think that he's. I think he makes the most sense. I mean, obviously, we'll see if anything changes on Wednesday or how we feel about him. He's one of those players that always makes me nervous. It feels like he's always carrying an injury, doesn't it? Like there's something about his. I think it's maybe just his style a little bit. I think he always kind of takes an extra couple seconds if somebody sized him down, Brandon. But I part of me wonders if Rashford is really the pick, though. There is a part of me that just thinks, well, he's going to score. I mean, Liverpool are shaky. He's going to be going up against Trent Alexander-Arnold, who stopped playing defense maybe the 2021 season, maybe, and so it's just going to be really tricky. It's going to be tricky to keep him out. Really, is what I'm thinking. And so I think you can make a strong argument for Rashford as well, but again, this is a week where I think you have 3 good captain options, and so you don't have to hurt yourself too much because I think there's a good chance all 3 of them get some kind of return. I mean, Haaland at home, even him, I think that even against Newcastle, who I rate very highly, and they will have Pope back as well. So if you're a Pope head, Brandon, then that's another key thing to consider. Yeah, well there you go. If you're a Pope head, then it's on the record. So I think that I'm leaning towards Saka myself with Rashford vice captain. What about transfers? What are you thinking for this week? Are you planning to make a move?
Yeah, I'm planning to hold, and I'll tell you why. I don't necessarily want to hold, but the move I would want to make is to get Ivan Toney in for Sam Greenwood. And I can only afford to do that if I move Salah. So to get Toney means I'm going to take a transfer hit. This doesn't feel like a great week for a hit to me, because otherwise I'm generally happy with my team. Yeah. So I'll play Salah at home to Manchester United and then take 2 free transfers into the Gameweek27 deadline where I can get somebody like Mitoma, Marsh, or McAllister from Brighton in for Salah and take my winnings and upgrade Greenwood to somebody like Toney.
Yeah. I'm somewhere between a hold and a transfer myself. I don't have the money problem, and I can see why in your case that does make sense. Obviously, if you could move Greenwood to Toney without a hit, I assume you would do it, right? If you could just do it with
I would
straight cash. Yeah,
I'd love to have another player who actually gets minutes. That would be wonderful.
Yeah. Salah for a hit is just one of those. Even playing Man United, it's just not a move you're ever going to feel great about. I think for me, I'm sort of in the same position where I'm considering Toney. And I guess we're just all going to gamble on this legal thing, right? That he's not going to, that'll be the ultimate FPL monkey wrench if halfway through this game week or maybe the Saturday morning of that match, Brentford have decided to keep him out because of a forthcoming legal, ruling.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. I feel like we would have heard news bubbling up. That feels like something that might come to pass over the summer once the season is over.
Yeah, I think you're probably right there. So Darwin, depending on his injury status, who knows, right? Darwin to Toney would make sense. I also think Gakpo to Mitoma is another move that I would consider. So if I make a move, it'll be with an eye towards Game Week 27 as well. I'm also fine holding, but so I'm sort of on the fence a little bit. I like the idea of making just because they play Man United at home, and I don't know that I see that being a high-scoring match just because I really do rate Man United at this point. I feel like defensively they've figured some things out. They look very solid. I don't necessarily see Liverpool scoring 3 or 4 goals in that match. And so at that point, why not just gamble on a Mitoma or a Toney and see if they can do something, especially because I already have Trent. Right now I've got Gakpo, Trent, and Darwin, right? So I'm already tripled up. I don't necessarily need to go into that a difficult Man United match tripled up on Liverpool players. So that's one thing I'm considering too.
Yeah, smart. All right, so we've got a pretty clear idea of where we sit, even in the midst of game week 25. That feels good. Do we need to tap into what our listeners are going through, their strife, in order to figure out what else is going on?
Yeah, let's do it. Stephen Curtis asks, we started to talk about this a moment ago, but he said, what to do with Liverpool assets as I have Gakpo and Trent. I got them for the double. Says he kind of answers a classic question for the pod, Brian, where you kind of answer your own question. But he says he guesses he wants to wait until the FA Cup results, but would love to ditch. I mean, I know you didn't bring him in, but to me, ditching Rashford doesn't really. Who am I ditching him for? Like, who's the player out there defensively who's just doing so well that I absolutely have to bring them in right now? It's I've already got an Arsenal defender, and I guess it would be Estepanian. I don't know, but like there's not a lot out there.
So you're thinking Trent, as you mentioned at the start, just hold Trent because there's not a huge. Yeah, it seems like Chelsea and Man City being so miserable as fantasy defenses just doesn't mean you have to move on anybody. I generally agree. And that was my feeling too about Liverpool specifically going into the game week 25 double was we are only thinking of Liverpool because of this double. I mean, when they got posterized 5-2 by Real Madrid, we suddenly knew, okay, Liverpool's return to form, that was a false dawn. Why are we even talking about Liverpool and getting these guys in who have not been in our fantasy teams for a long time? And it is because of this double game week. The long road I'm walking here to get to this point is like you should not feel any remorse by immediately dropping these Liverpool players because they will have served their purpose in game week 25. And maybe you're going to bring one or two back or hold on to one of them as you look ahead to a potential double in game week 29. Sure, but you just don't need these guys anymore is my feeling.
Yeah, when it comes to Salah, Gakpo, Darwin, I tend to agree. I think defensively, I just think that Trent is probably maybe as good as you can get right now defensively. There just aren't a lot. I mean, they've kept 3 clean sheets in a row. He's on everything. It's crazy that he's not getting some of these goals with that indirect free. I wish that Salah would just back off some of these is it really like helping that much for him to roll the ball a foot and a half so Trent can't hit the ball on the like stationary. He's got it. Salah's got to pick up an assist for it.
I guess that's technically a direct kick, and but they sort of like worked it like an indirect free kick. But I mean it was perfectly worked if Jordan Henderson wasn't standing in the way, leaping in front of the shot.
Yeah, Henderson's really become a problem for Liverpool. I mean, I feel like this was like the first game week I can remember or the first Liverpool match I can remember where I felt like everybody was starting to come to terms with Henderson. Great Stewart. What is he, like 35 now? I mean, he's been there for a long. He's been very, very good for a long time. There's nothing.
He's got to be younger than 35. He just kind of like it's bad feet. What do I keep telling you, Josh? When your feet are messed up, they're messed up forever. And he's had all these foot problems. Let's see. I'm looking up Henderson. He's 32.
32. Okay, he looks 35. He looks older, Brandon. He's out in the sun that much, and it ages you a little bit. So that's it's 32 going on 30. He's got the body of a 36-year-old though.
I'm compelled to stand up for Jordan Henderson for some odd reason. I mean,
see yourself in him.
Yeah, I don't think he ever reached an elite level, but he definitely filled a needed position and captained Liverpool through their greatest period. And like, even though, he's kind of off it now, kind of coincided with Liverpool's drop in form, he is one of the few Liverpool players out on the pitch that has any kind of engine still. Like, him and James Milner are just like motoring around the pitch trying to do work, and I appreciate that. I see them.
Well, that's fair. I mean, the work rate is, their ex hustle is certainly is terrific. Yeah. But I think having Van Dijk back has obviously helped the Liverpool defense as well. I mean, every team is going to have a few chances against you, but once he's with a healthy Van Dijk, you just feel a lot more confident that they're going to be able to hold up. And that, I think that's why I ultimately did kind of decide to go all in Liverpool, was just, even with the Real Madrid result, they're just not playing Real Madrid in these double game weeks, right? They're playing Crystal Palace and Wolves. And so, but they really can't, they can't figure it out up front at the moment. And obviously having Darwin out, this is like a little like kind of thing that bugs me a little bit, which is, when Nketiah is out, a lot of people rush to be like, here's why that's great for Saka or whoever. When Darwin's out, it's like, here's why this is great news for Salah. And I'm like, that's just not quite. It's like a little bit too much fantasy brain for me. It's like, in reality, what happens is when a team isn't playing their best 11, the team just doesn't look like they're at their best. And I felt like that way even with Arsenal. Now, granted, Nketiah is a backup striker, so it's already a little bit different. But you lose a little bit of focus up front, and I felt like Arsenal could have used somebody in the box. I mean, ultimately, it did work out okay for Martinelli. I'm not even sure if that was intended to be a cross or a shot. And it felt like it was right. It kind of nestled. It's like the way it. I actually thought it was kind of a cross for Saka, and then it was a little surprised it went in. But anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked too much here. But I think that. I mean, we have gotten sidetracked, haven't we?
Too late.
Too late. Let's just move on to the next question. King Koopa says, which Brentford and Brighton assets are you prioritizing, given their favorable fixtures in Gameweek 26 and the 2 upcoming doubles?
Well, we've mentioned their names already, and I think Toney's been a little quiet in a fantasy respect of late. He's just like a quintessential mid-table team. Pick the number 9, and that's how you do it. And he's an elite penalty taker, and I love these things for my fantasy team. And Mbomo, he is always kind of just in Toney's shadow, but he just doesn't have that ceiling. That if everything goes as it should, according to plan, Toney will get us the points, and then Mbomo will have a little bit of a trickle here. And I mean, I guess if you can't afford Toney, like if I could actually afford to bring in Mbomo right now for Sam Greenwood, would I do that? No, that just doesn't feel optimal, but it feels okay.
Yeah. It would be acceptable. Like it would be okay, but I agree. It's like this is like when people want to bring in. I always think of like someone like Joel. Yeah, that's exactly who I was thinking of. Joel Matip is always that option, right? Where you're like, it can work. I mean, sometimes you can gamble and it'll work for like a game week or two, right? But then over the course of 10, which I guess we're talking about 3 matches here, but even across a 3-match sample, I feel like you're going to start to regret it a little bit, right? Because over a long enough sample, the players that are more expensive, it's like it's priced in. I mean, this is how I feel about X minutes sometimes, which is just like, well, X minutes are priced in basically by starts, or by the way, like quite literally, like the price that you're paying is for the consistency of these players, right? This is why Saka's going to be at least 10 million next year, because it's just the best player who starts every match is always going to be the most expensive player. And so anyway, I'm not really sure what I think that Toney is, Bomo's also like a 59th minute sub merchant. Like this is the kind of thing it feels like he's one of those players who's always liable to come off like 13 minutes into the second half. And then when it comes to Brighton, I mean, I know you've been like big on the Estepanian thing for a while.
Yeah, he's like in the mold of Trent Alexander-Arnold in fantasy terms, where he's just like a very attacking fullback. And he's shown that he can he has the goal and assist involvement with Brighton's attack. Brighton loves scoring goals under De Zerbi, so this feels good. And it's as they're coming up against weaker opposition, I think like Brighton are just like a very sturdy, solid team at the moment, as much as made of them just kind of being this buccaneering attacking team. They don't really leak goals. And Leeds and Crystal Palace, teams that truly do struggle to score. So, a lot of people will just immediately gravitate to Mitoma and Solly Marsh because of their attacking output. But I think there's an equally high ceiling with Estupiñán, just for the possibility that they get a clean sheet at least in 27.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, you and I are both Bueno owners, sweating out all these Bueno matches. Well, actually, he might not be a great drop, because depending on what happens at Gameweek 28, you may want to keep him. for that one. I think it'd be really useful to have these FA Cup matches over and know who plays and who doesn't, because it makes it very hard to do a lot of long-term planning, doesn't it? When you don't quite know, like if it turns out I only have 3 or 4 players, I'm just going to kind of lock myself mentally into a Game Week 28 free hit. Yeah. And then that almost makes the next 2 weeks easier for me, because I can just focus on the ones in front of me, maybe with an eye towards 29 as well. Speaking of looking ahead, FPL Blues, one of our producer patrons, Brandon, is part of the FPL Blues podcast. They said, asking for future blanks and double game weeks, can you share your point of view on the teams that are clear to voids and any players that you see as essential, even with a single fixture, beyond just Haaland, Rashford, and Trippier? So I've already dropped Trippier. Trippier's gone from my squad, Brandon. That was the gamble that I took. But Haaland and Rashford, I think those would be the 2 easy answers. The one that comes to mind for me is Kepa. Is there any? What would you think about as you think about the big double in 29? As you think about some blanks ahead? I mean, they're not going to blank in 28, but even like your wild card possibly in the next couple of weeks. Could Kepa be out, or are you just kind of sticking with Kepa the rest of the season?
No, I think Kepa doesn't survive a wild card. He survives at least until the wild card, because I just don't. One would not recommend a goalkeeper transfer at this point. We're looking at these doubles and blanks where there's just no real upside to trying to move your keeper around. I mean, Chelsea's defense has not been great. Thiago Silva getting injured against Spurs is pretty bad, actually, from a Kepa owner point of view. And from a Thiago Silva friends and family point of view, let it be said. But Kepa, whatever magic he had in his boots for a couple of months there where he was just actually saving shots, he seems to be over that. I think it's hard to tell like how if he saw the Oliver Skip shot too late and he could only get his hand to it, but I did feel like
it's just a good shot. I think I felt this when I watched that too. I had the same thought, because he did get the hand on it, kind of pushes it up off the bar. But I think that's just a good. I mean, the real problem is that no one closed to Skip down, right? It was like first of all, it was like a clear. Not to get too in the weeds here, but it was a clearance that didn't need to happen, right? Kepa was right there; he could just grab the ball, and then it gets cleared out to
poorly.
Skip. Yeah, poorly out to Skip, who just has acres of space, right? Like it's a great any player shoots from there. You can't Thiago. Would have Thiago from Liverpool, like anyone would have shot from that spot, and when you get that much space and that much time, you're gonna put on something pretty good for the keeper, to have to handle.
Yes, that is fair, but what is the if you were for whatever reason wild carding right now, I do think you'd have to look at Sanchez at Brighton and David Raya in particular. The thing that with not doing the wild card thing and you've got one free transfer, I can think on both of those teams, Brighton and Brentford, a defender I'd rather have. Ben Mee has been pretty elite on set pieces for Brentford, so you've got a slightly higher ceiling than David Raya there because you might get a goal or some sort of involvement from Ben Mee. And then Estupiñán, who we mentioned. And what's interesting to see is FPL goal involvement through the last. I'm on my stats kick today, Josh. I'm not sure it's helping anybody, but Estupiñán has the exact same level of FPL goal involvement as Mitoma over the last 6 game weeks, which I think is interesting. Solly March is just like blowing both of them out of the water from a stats perspective.
I still can't quite believe it. It's it's like, when is he going to revert? I mean, obviously the positions changed a little bit, but it's so strange how well he's doing this year. I can't. He's like it's hard for me to like totally blank slate him, Brandon, because Solly March is the guy who gets 2 goals and 1 assist every season, and now he's like this awesome moan.
Going back to the FPL Blues question, though, I'm still drinking the Luke Shaw Kool-Aid at the moment, and I think he has supplanted Trippier as the best fullback in the fantasy game at the moment, and he's just elite. Ten Hag trusts him, plays him in every match. He's like a tank at the moment. He runs and runs and runs for 90 minutes. He's putting in pretty decent challenges and pretty great crosses. He had the assist to Casemiro in the League Cup final today. So it's just like Luke Shaw. Shout out to him.
And doubles in 29 too. Yeah. So I'm with you there with Shaw. That's actually one of the reasons why I felt okay dropping Trippier, is because I felt like Shaw was kind of right there in terms of players that I really wanted to own and kind of moving forward. Mm-hmm. All right, 2 more questions, Brandon. It's like low key the Chelsea pod this week. And again, let's see what happens when Tuchel comes back and how he changes things. Leisure Rule says, debatable it ever began, but is the João Felix experiment officially over? Honestly, should we consider it over for all Chelsea assets this season? So
I don't know what was going on against Spurs, but João Felix was playing like the 10 or he was deeper. He wasn't. I was impressed when he first joined Chelsea because all of his features seem to be, this guy's really fast and he's like breaking the defensive line continuously, and he was doing none of that against Spurs. So that was disheartening. Raheem Sterling had a miserable game against Spurs. So like Felix will not be back on the menu for fantasy managers until Potter, or as you say, Josh Tuchel, figures out how to actually set up that attack. Because as it is, they have since since the new year they have scored nobody has scored fewer goals in the Premier League than Chelsea. They're on 6 goals. I think there's another club that's also on 6 goals.
Well, it's been the criticism too that they spent like $800 million on these 30, 40-year contracts, and they sort of have a forward. It's like it seems like a problem. I mean, Havertz to me will represent this whole kind of era for Chelsea. Just like a kind of a talented player, good pedigree. In some ways
scores the winning Champions League goal.
Well, he did that, right? And so does that make up for everything else? Like maybe it's like, but he's not. I don't know. It's like they're kind of playing up front because they've got nobody else. I mean, you can hardly say that he's torn up the league the last 2 years, right?
He has not. No, that's true. That is true.
All right. So final question is: you had me for a minute on the ropes, but I think I came back with enough to come back to.
You squirmed away from me that time.
At the very least, it was a stalemate. Simon Copson says, what to do with the kanji in defense in general, please? Other than Trippier, I don't even know who to have anymore.
Okay, find yourself a human-sized cannon, put a kanji inside of it, and shoot him as far away from your fantasy team as possible. That's a pretty easy one to answer.
Weirdly, we actually answered this question ourselves already, right? Which is that we both feel really high about Shaw, and I feel good. I mean, I think Trent is too expensive, but I just like him because when there's a lot of defensive chaos, lean towards players who can get you points different ways. Mm-hmm. And also, I mean, the Arsenal defense is still totally fine to own. I mean, it feels like you're never going to get more than 6 points, but
it's a less joyful thing than it was during the first couple months of the season owning these Arsenal defenders. But here we are.
That's true. All right, that is it for the podcast. Thanks everyone for listening. I hope our Chelsea supporters have stuck around long enough to get to the end. Sorry for anything Brandon may have said. I tried to talk him out of it. But thanks everyone for listening. And we will see you next week. Brandon, do you want to give a quick goodbye and thank you to our Patreon supporters, our producer patrons?
Yes, goodbye specifically to our wonderful Patreon supporters. If you want to check out what that means, go to patreon.com/always cheating. And as always, thanks to our producer level patrons, Mike DePietro, Trevor Ingerson, our buddy Chris Howell, the Big Gaffer, Bobbs Kuhn, James Holland, Dave Wagner Lodahl, Nick Wright, Lazaros Llanos, Jesse Halstead, Bruce Kerr, Brian Chin, Rich Evans, Blair Jacobson, Todd Byerly, Andy Portlock, Dan Parsons at FPL Merch, Carrie Swanson, Jefferson Turner, Francis Moore, Sam Shower, Caleb Robbie, Lee Hickman, Volker Paulson Kruger, Alex Holcomb, James Keatley, The Saint, Bob Fox, Craig Jackson, James Conroy, Shalin F. Kadakia, Terrence O'Donnell, Paul Herzig, Heath Cram, Roberta Morals, Thomas Tislov, and Noah and Louise. And as always, we remind you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get podcasts, including YouTube. You can listen to the podcast on YouTube. More video content, we promise, is on the way. It's forever a brainstorm that we are having, Josh. How to get our beautiful faces in front of everybody.
This is how it happens. You and I kick an idea around for a year or so, and then we do it. So it is coming. But thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back with our Patreon pod on Thursday, and then which will recap the end of a wild game week. So good luck to everybody on Wednesday as well. Bye.